Hello. Okay, Nosferatu, one of my anticipated movies of the year, directed by Robert Eggers. It's a reimagining of the 1922 silent German expressionist vampire movie of the same name, which was also the unauthorized and unofficial adaptation of the 1897 Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. Hence why the names are different. We've got Count Orlok instead of Count Dracula. We've got Ellen instead of Mina. And for those of you that have been following me for a while now on this channel will know I'm a big fan of Robert Eggers, and I've just been really looking forward to seeing his take, his reimagining of this very classic story. And there are minor differences or changes within the story between the 1922 silent movie and Bram Stoker's Dracula, as there is with most adaptations. For example, Francis Ford Coppola's adaptation of the novel had minor changes with how sort of the characters' journeys would play out. It's a movie that I absolutely adore, but for me personally, I felt like Robert Eggers' Nosferatu was the most authentic adaptation or reimagining of this story. For me, Robert Eggers beautifully captures the tone and atmosphere of that novel. He does a great job at creating this foreboding sense of dread that builds throughout the movie as the story evolves. It is beautifully done, and it does it in a way that sort of just really kind of, well, it sucked me right in to this creepy, seductive, eerie atmosphere that he just beautifully brings to life. And the way that builds through the story here with Nosferatu is incredible. It sort of builds gradually to this horrifying and settling climax that swept me up in a way that I really wasn't expecting it to. It was quite tragic, it's horrifying, and there's this, I just got a sudden sense of sadness that I just wasn't expecting, because it kind of ties into one of the minor sort of negatives that I have with not just this experience, but with most sort of adaptations of the novel, and the novel itself even. I've read the novel twice, and that minor gripe being with how the characters are written and how they're presented, whether it be within the novel or on the screen. I've never really been able to emotionally get invested into the characters' stories, and what I felt like Robert Eggers does here beautifully, and what he does achieve for me, was an actual story where, yes, I'm still not quite there emotionally when it comes to the characters' journeys, but puts me on a journey that just manages to swallow me up within sort of these characters' nightmares and turmoil and sort of internal suffering and pain. I can sense what these characters were going through, and as a result, it just manages to swallow me up within sort of that kind of foreboding sense of dread that is beautifully created to this climax, like I said, just swallows me up, and I'm there just sort of experiencing these mix of emotions which are in a way unexpected but also make sense due to how the movie is constructed, as well as the fantastic performance by Lily Rose Depp, who helps really sell the pain and the suffering and sort of the turmoil that the character is going through internally. And the same goes for all of the performances within this movie, whether it be Willem, Dafoe, who is absolutely amazing here, or Nicholas Hoult and Aaron Taylor-Johnson. They all beautifully capture the horror that their characters are within, and really sort of get across sort of that internal sort of nightmare that's going on within them and what it is they are experiencing. The performances do a really good job at capturing the sort of the hypnotic, delirious spell that they find themselves under, which is Count Orlok. And I just feel like how Count Orlok is brought to life by Bill Skarsgård is incredible. It is beautiful. He completely transforms himself into this entity, this creature, and there is something just very hypnotic about his performance and how he brings a character to life through his sort of the sound of his voice. It's very sort of guttural, And just whenever he's on the screen, and a lot of the time his presence is there, but you don't really see him. For the first 2 acts, you know, he may be obscured, or just how the way in which a moment would be framed. You would somewhat see him in the distance or behind another character, but you never really fully see him. And I just love how they sort of create this kind of sense of Count Orlok always being there. Even when you're not at the castle, his presence is always felt. Sort of really kind of instilling a kind of like a haunting sensation throughout this entire experience. And the entire experience is aided by this beautifully haunting score by a Robin Corrin. He manages to beautifully capture that sense of dread and horror that the characters are within, but also conveys that sort of foreboding sense of dread that builds throughout the entire experience, and sort of climaxes into that moment, which for me personally really sweep me up emotionally. And there's a piece of music during that moment, just like with how that moment is beautifully crafted, whether it be through the performances and how it's framed, but it's also captured by this beautiful piece of music. I'm not entirely sure the name of the piece of music within this moment, but it beautifully captures the tragic nature of its story and what the characters are going through, and it all just elevates the emotions and impact in that moment. Robert Eggers' Nosferatu was like being in a fever dream-like experience. He just manages to capture sort of, or convey, being put under this spell. Like, I felt like I was there under this spell of Count Orlok due to how the story is crafted. It's very much a Robert Eggers movie. Yes, we've seen countless adaptations, we've seen this story many times before, and you can't help but feel that, yeah, but it's still very much a Robert Eggers film, and you can't, you know, he does a beautiful job at bringing this story to life through his perspective, through his style of directing, whether it be the gorgeous cinematography, the set design, the sound design. All of these different elements of how this movie's brought to life technically gave me a very hypnotic, mesmerizing, seductive experience that evokes all the right emotions. It's a very chilling and atmospheric experience, and it's because of all of these elements that I've mentioned that for me this felt like the most authentic adaptation of that novel. Like, I will always love Francis Ford Coppola's adaptation. You know, I grew up watching that movie, and I'm in awe at how the story was brought to life within his version. But it's a much more romanticized and exaggerated adaptation, you could say. Whereas here, it's much more earthy and gritty due to how it's all brought to life. Like, going back to sort of the colour palette and the cinematography, you know, the colour is drained from this movie, and it's all aided then by sort of the orange hues from the candlelight. And for me, that kind of just really helped instill that earthy grittiness to the story that makes it feel even more real and dirty. I do feel like the pacing perhaps stumbles a little bit in the second act going into the third act, where it seems to sort of rush to a certain point within the story, and I just felt like we didn't really get the moments that had enough time to breathe, or sort of we didn't really get enough moments with certain characters and sort of what certain characters were going through within that portion of the story. And that could be just down to what was cut out. I think it was just said in an interview that there was quite a bit cut out, and there's going to be an extended version on the 4K when it releases, which I'm really looking forward to. And maybe that is the reason to why sort of the second act going into the third act, the pacing does kind of somewhat stumble a little bit, and you could kind of feel like a sudden sense of urgency really with how the story escalates, and it kind of sort of tells, but it wasn't really enough to throw me out of the experience. I could kind of just sense it, and I felt like there was a lot of nods towards Francis Ford Coppola's adaptation as well within certain moments, and I just loved how certain moments would play out with Count Orlok and sort of with the use of shadows. It would be so creepy, eerie and hypnotic to experience. I was completely mesmerized by this experience. It was everything that I wanted it to be. It's everything that I expected it to be from a visual and perspective and technical. I mean, with Robert Eggers, I'm a massive fan of Robert Eggers. This is very much his take on a very familiar story. And this interpretation of Dracula, which is Count Orlok, it's more beast-like, it's more creature-like than the version within Bram Stoker's novel. But it also retains that kind of the sexual, erotic nature within its story as well, but also with that kind of the almost like an animalistic layer on top of it, which sort of really kind of injects more of a disturbedness to these moments. Like there's this one particular moment where Orlok is feeding, and in a way from how he moves within that moment, it was quite sexual, but also very animalistic. And that's sort of, again, going back to sort of the differences between Nosferatu and Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula. So yeah, they are my thoughts on Nosferatu. I have been eagerly awaiting this movie all year. We finally got it on New Year's Day here in the UK. It was being released a week early in the States, but for us in the UK, it's a 2025 movie, one of my anticipated movies of the year, and it didn't disappoint. So yeah, enough rambling from me. They are my thoughts on Nosferatu, and I will be giving Nosferatu a 9 out of 10. So yeah, what did you guys think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Then please let me know in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie reviews from just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. I've got a few videos planned over the next week. I got a couple of top 10 lists still on the way for last year. So I've got my top 10 worst or most disappointing movies of 2024, as well as one that I've never done before, and that is scores, music. I want to do my top 10 favourite soundtracks of 2024, and the soundtrack to a movie means an awful lot to me, and how that kind of plays into the story, how it weaves into the story, and it's something that I really want to talk a lot more about, because I'm quite passionate about music in general and how much music plays a part in bringing a story to life. So I really wanted to compile a list of my favourite scores from last year as well. So quite a bit planned, and I look forward to sharing with you all those. And just another big thank you to all of those that have subscribed over the years and recently. It means an awful lot, and for everyone that connects to the channel, I really do appreciate it. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be catching you guys soon.